Hello guys, welcome back to Quick Movie Cap. Today we gonna cover the 2012 sci-fi movie Looper. The movie packs with action, thriller and time traveling, so watch out and take care. The movie starts with Joe killing a man who has just appeared suddenly. The man he killed is from the future. In 2044, the United States has suffered an economic collapse, causing severe social decay and growth in organized crime. In addition, a strange mutation has occurred in 10% of the population, giving them minor telekinetic powers, manifested in their ability to float small objects. They are referred to as TKs. 30 years into the future in 2074, time travel is invented but is immediately outlawed. However, by that point tracking technology has rendered it nearly impossible to dispose of bodies secretly. Crime bosses turn to time travel to send their targets to the past, the movie's present, to be killed by loopers, which are gunmen that are paid in silver to kill whoever is sent to them. But since time travel is illegal in the future, crime bosses need to erase all the evidence of this crime. So they send the future looper back to the past to be killed by his younger self to close the loop, and this he must do by himself. For that they are compensated handsomely in gold so that they can live the rest of their lives comfortably. While at the club one evening, another looper announces that he has just closed his loop. The big payoff in gold is a reason to party. As Joe continues his work, he and the other loopers begin to notice that loops are being closed at an increasing pace. One night, Seth, Joe's friend, and a fellow looper, visits him in a panic, telling him that he was supposed to close his loop but couldn't do it. Seth reports that his victim appeared, singing a song his mother had sung to him when he was a baby. Knowing that it was his future self, Seth couldn't kill him. Old Seth tells Seth about a new crime boss called the Rainmaker, who has commenced a reign of terror in the future. But the old Seth runs away. The Gatmen then knock on Joe's door, so he hides Seth in his apartment floor safe. The Gatmen suspect Joe is shielding Seth, so they take him into Abe. Abe is the boss who runs the looper business in that area. He came from the future. He asks Joe to give up his friend Seth. He made a deal with him. He said he won't kill him, but if he doesn't give up his friend, he will take half of his silver which he's been saving up for retirement in France. So Joe gives up his friend Seth. Old Seth attempts to climb a barbed wire fence, but notices old scars appearing on his arm, spelling out words telling him to go to an address. He ignores this, and one of his fingers disappears. Shortly after, another finger is gone. Then the tip of his nose is cut off. Old Seth returns to his car and heads to the address he was given. Running toward it, he loses his foot, then both feet, and he falls to the ground, starts crawling on floor. He bangs on the door, and it is opened by Kid Blue, who immediately shoots him. Behind the shooter, we can see young Seth, alive on a table where they were chopping off his body parts, and we hear the sound of a ventilator. Joe continues to do the killings. While waiting to do one killing, he is puzzled when the victim is late. When the person does appear, he has no bag over his head. Joe recognizes the man as his older self and tries to shoot him. Old Joe spins around and uses the gold on his back to deflect the bullet. He grabs a gold bar and throws it at Joe, then knocks him out with a punch. Joe comes to and finds a note, telling him to get out of town. Instead, Joe returns to his apartment, where he finds the Gatmen searching it and removing his silver. He traps Kid Blue in his floor safe, but is winged by another Gatman, then he falls from his fire escape and blacks out. The flashback ends and he's back at killing. After shooting, he found gold on the target's back, and he finds out it is his older self. So as per Abe's advice, he goes to Shanghai in China for his retirement, where he enjoys his money and spends it all. He then gets back to killing again as the years pass. Later on, he gets married to a young Chinese woman. On the 30th year since the killing, the Rainmaker's guys kidnaps him to get him assassinated. As they are about to send him to the past, he overpowers them and kills all of them. But he still jumps in the time machine, and we are back at the flashback that Joe had seen. Old Joe finds his younger self and saves him. Old Joe looks up some cryptic numbers at the library when begin to form on his arm, spelling out Beatrix. Old Joe meets young Joe at the diner. They order identical meals. Old Joe asks Joe how his French lessons are going, then proceeds to say in French, "I know you have a gun under the table pointed at me." When young Joe doesn't understand, Old Joe says it is okay that you didn't get all that. You will. As Old Joe says, he's glad he learned the language. Old Joe tells Joe more about the Rainmaker. He appeared out of nowhere and single-handedly took control of all the major crime syndicates within 6 months. He's responsible for mass executions and vagrant purges, and he ordered the closing of all loops. The syndicate men killed Old Joe's wife by accident when he was captured. Shortly before this, Old Dale, one of Joe's looper colleagues, gave him a numerical sequence that hints at finding the Rainmaker. Old Joe knows that in Joe's present, the child who will grow up to become the Rainmaker is living in the same county. If Old Joe can kill the younger Rainmaker, then he will never get captured, and his wife would still be alive. All that is known about the Rainmaker is that he has a synthetic jaw, and he watched his mother being killed. Suddenly Geth men bust in and start firing, but Old Joe defends himself, and is successful in running through the cornfield. Geth men start shooting at young Joe too, but he runs off as well and follows the coordinates which Old Joe had given him. To get to the farmhouse owned by Sarah, who lives with her son Sid, Joe jumps in to save her. But he is just a hobo. Joe gets sick because of drugs and Sarah helps him. The next morning, when Joe shows Sarah the map, Sarah recognizes the digits as Sid's birthday and the serial number of the hospital where he was born. This prompts young Joe to explain the situation about the Rainmaker. Sarah proves to know a lot about loopers and how they work. The database Old Joe used with the string of digits produced 3 possible children born on the same day in the same hospital, and he intends to kill them. Sarah tells Sid to stay away from Joe, but Sid is curious. He befriends Joe and shows him some of the electronics gear he is playing with. Sid builds transmitters so Joe and Sarah can signal each other. Joe is very impressed with the advanced work the 5-year-old is doing. Old Joe tracks down one of the potential Rainmaker children, who is heading to a birthday party. He kills him, but when he realizes that he still exists in his past, he breaks down crying. He has killed the wrong child. He then heads to the other child's place, but is hesitant when he realizes it is where his girlfriend, Susie, from 30 years earlier, is living with her son. Instead of killing the child right away, he watches their apartment. As young Joe and Sarah become close, he learns that she is telekinetic with slightly more power than the other TKs, and that Sid was raised by Sarah's sister for 2 years until she was somehow killed. Sid thinks Sarah's sister is his mother and does not believe that Sarah is his real mother. Sarah is shown to be frightened of Sid, running to her room and hiding in a safe when Sid gets angry at her due to his belief that she's lying about being his mother. The next day, one of the Gat men come looking for Joe. Sid helps him escape, and he leaves after searching around the house. While Sid and Joe are alone hiding from the man, Joe tells him how his own mother gave him to the panhandlers, so he grew up without her. A while later he reveals she sold him, and that she used drugs. We see how being motherless led Joe to become a killer and a drug user. During the night when Sarah is alone in her bed, she called Joe, and they started making love. Jesse is suspicious of Sarah and returns, holding Sarah at gunpoint when Joe comes down the stairs. As Joe tries to reason with Jesse, Sid starts to come down the stairs. Startled by Jesse, Sid falls down the stairs and goes into a rage. He lets out a massive telekinetic blast, killing Jesse. Jesse's blood rains out of his chest, implying how the Rainmaker's name was coined. Sid's extraordinary telekinetic abilities confirm to Joe that Sid is the Rainmaker, and that Sarah's sister was killed by Sid when he lost control of his powers. Joe finds Sid in the sugarcane fields, crying, and he comforts him. Sarah helps Joe realize that the boy needs love, and may not turn into the Rainmaker if he is raised in a loving home. Meanwhile, Kid Blue has tracked Old Joe to Susie's apartment and captures him when he breaks inside to kill the child. Young Joe tells Sarah and Sid to flee, surmising that his employers and/or Old Joe will target the farm. Old Joe breaks free, killing Abe and all the Gat men except for Kid Blue, who is shot in the foot. As the two Joes confront each other near Sarah's house, Kid Blue attacks and is killed by young Joe. Sarah and Sid attempt to drive away, but Old Joe starts shooting at their truck. Sid wants Sarah to stop the truck so they don't come closer, but instead, Sarah steps on the gas, hoping to run Old Joe over. Getting scared, Sid uses his TK powers to cause the truck to flip. He and Sarah attempt to run to the sugar cane field to hide. Old Joe attempts to shoot them, and the bullet grazes Sid's cheek. Sid goes into another rage and uses a blast of his TK powers to suspend Sarah and Old Joe in the air. Joe follows after Old Joe in his truck, which is knocked over by the TK blast. Sarah calms Sid, telling him repeatedly that she loves him and that he'll be okay. Sid calms down and ends his TK storm. Sarah hugs Sid, and he calls her mom for the first time, showing Joe that Sid can be controlled. Recovering, Old Joe grabs his gun, ready to shoot Sid. Sarah sends Sid into the cane fields and uses her body as a shield, preventing Old Joe from shooting. Finally, Old Joe shoots Sarah through the heart. Sid sees his mother die, then escapes through the sugarcane fields and onto a slowly passing freight train. Flashback to a moment before the shot was fired. Young Joe understands that by shooting Sarah and wounding Sid, old Joe creates the embittered child who will become the Rainmaker without his mother's love, and also realizes that even by killing old Joe, the loop will not be closed and old Joe will keep coming back. He pulls the trigger and dies, thus closing the loop circuit from his end. Almost instantly, old Joe disappears. Sarah lovingly puts Sid to bed after bandaging up the cut on his face caused by old Joe's shot. Sarah then goes back out to the sugar field and notices that the ground around the overturned truck is strewn with gold bars, which old Joe looted from Abe's headquarters. She walks over to young Joe's body lying in the field and takes a moment to stroke his hair, something that he had confided to Susie that his own mother used to do for him.